On the Radar with the CBS 17 Storm Team.
Welcome to On the Radar. It's your weekly look at our weather world exclusively here on CBS 17 Plus. Biggest weather stories, biggest science stories that we can find. Glad you're here with us. I'm Wes Hohenstein.
I'm Rachel Duensing. Yes, we have another jam-packed episode that we need to fit into today. And we're going to start, of course, with hurricane season. We're now officially into hurricane season, but what can we expect over the next few months? We have the official forecast from NOAA. We're going to walk you through that and, again, explain some of their reasoning. But also, speaking of hurricanes, Western North Carolina was absolutely devastated when Hurricane Helene went through last season. They are starting to rebuild. They're starting to grow back, and spring and summertime is a great time to go out and visit, so we're going to talk to folks there. And speaking of spring and summertime, that is great baseball weather. So again, we're going to talk to our friends a little closer to home in Zebulon, 5-County Stadium with the Mudcats, talking about how the weather impacts how they get their field ready so everyone can enjoy.
Secrets to their green grass.
Yeah, absolutely.
I want to know.
I know. And we mentioned, of course, some science stories. It is not Rachel and Wes sit down and talk about the weather, with somehow incorporating space and some space history into all of that. So, of course, there's a lot to get to, but we really want to start with hurricane season, Wes.
Yeah, it feels like since the season ended last year on November 30th, that with everything that was happening with the recovery from Helene to June 1st this year, that the season really never ended. And I know it's different all across the country, but for North Carolina, I feel like every week we had something hurricane related because of what happened in Western North Carolina with Helene.
Yeah, and it kind of gives people a little bit of PTSD as well. They're so concerned now with any hurricane that comes through, and even in the case of Helene, it was a remnant hurricane. It was what was left of it, and it still caused all of that devastation. So we want to get into what NOAA, the official forecast from NOAA and the National Hurricane Center, have put together, and you can see it here on the graphic, West, but obviously we want to spend some time and talk about this.
Yeah, so NOAA, kind of the third of the big three that we keep an eye on. Of course, Colorado State, they've been doing it for more than 40 years. They come out usually first early on before the season begins. Right down the street from us here in Raleigh, North Carolina State University has been issuing forecasts for over 20 years, I think. And then our government, NOAA, they come out with their seasonal outlook, and we don't dissect the numbers too much, but we kind of step back and look at big picture. And this is another agency that is predicting an above average season from June 1st to November 30th. So the numbers I always like to remind people of, the averages. So over the last 30 years, what do we average? Named storms, hurricanes, major hurricanes, 14, 7, and 3. 14, 7, and 3. Those are imprinted in all our weather nerd brains, 14, 7, and 3. And NOAA is predicting above that in most cases.
Yeah, so obviously we're going to see the range here, and as Wes mentioned, the average 14. The range is as low as 13, but also as high as 19. If you dig really sort of deep into the release that they said, they are expecting, or at least a higher probability of not being below average. Is there a possibility that we hit the low end of all these thresholds? Absolutely. That would be great. We obviously want the lower end of things, but they're saying with just how everything is looking, that it is more than likely going to be either near or above average, which means the higher side of this number. So possibly as many as 19 named storms, possibly as high as 10 hurricanes, and possibly as high as 5 major hurricanes. Now, as we compare this to last season, this could be pretty similar to what we experienced last season. Last season had 18 overall total named storms. That's tropical storms and hurricanes. But we had 11 hurricanes. That's kind of a lot when you look at it, especially that means only 7 tropical storms. Everything else was hurricanes. And of those 11, 5 were major hurricanes. Both of those, of course, actually all 3 of these were well above average. But especially in terms of hurricanes, we had a lot of hurricanes last season.
Yeah, we did. And that's indicative of this pattern that we've been in for the last 20 to 30 years. Warm water out in the Atlantic. You know, you need 80-degree water to technically get a tropical system going and sustaining. And we have had numbers that are way above that. And we're expecting above average water temperatures again this year. And then we're also expecting the wind shear way in the upper levels of the atmosphere to be weak. And when it's weak, it's a lot easy for a storm to spin up. So you got warm water underneath, you got light wind shear above, and that's why we could see an above average season again.
Yeah, even though we're expecting not either El Nino or La Nina, it's still looking like that wind shear, which El Nino and La Nina can impact. It still looks like, as Wes mentioned, that we could have more of that wind shear. Now, something else that we actually keep a very close eye on, the West African monsoon season, basically their rainy season. So if you've ever paid close attention to where some of our long track and powerful hurricanes develop, it's in the eastern Atlantic, and these are sort of westerly moving waves. And a lot of times those waves start out as remnant rain and thunderstorms from West Africa. And so what happens is they're in their monsoon season. It's raining every single day. Think Southwest Florida, think Florida during the summertime. You know, they have a very similar pattern where they have this rainy season really every summer and into early fall. And as we get what's left over of that, they march into the Atlantic. Well, if we have warm waters in the Atlantic and we have less wind shear, what's left of that can move over those warm waters and wind shear, especially if it's lighter, and they can develop. So they are expecting a pretty active West African monsoon season this year, and that actually peaks usually about June into July, but it does last even into early September, which is pretty typical of when we get most of our tropical cyclones developing in that part of the Atlantic.
Right, so we should remind everyone, just because the season starts on June 1st, I think we all know from hurricanes past here in North Carolina, I mean, the prime time for us to really be on alert and the most likely time that we will see storms is August, September, and unfortunately, as we've learned the last few years, even into the first week or two of October.
Yep. Alrighty, so hopefully we don't have to get too far into this name list this year, but we always like to bring it up. People like to see the names go anywhere from Andrea, hopefully not as far as Wendy, but those are sort of the range of names. Remember, they alternate between female and male, every other name. But yeah, we've got Andrea, Umberto, Imelda, all of these different names. So again, hopefully we don't have to go too far into this list, but here they are for your reference.
And that's the same list that was used back in 2019. The one exception is Dexter. That is a new name because the old D name, which is escaping me right now.
Dorian,
thank you, was retired. Anytime there's a bad storm, they throw the name out and they bring in a new one. So Dexter is new to the list. And on the high threshold of the NOAA forecast, it was 19 named storms. So that would take us all the way to Tanya or Tanya. Is it Tanya Tucker, country singer, or Tanya Harding, ice skater?
I can't remember. They do put out a pronunciation list every year, so we're gonna have to brush on.
No Isaias.
No Isaias this year. That was
Thank goodness.
Right. Alrighty, so that is a little bit more about hurricane season. We've talked a lot about Western North Carolina. They've really just gone through the ringer over October and November and going through the cold months as well. But now it's spring. Things are starting to wake up. It's getting a little warmer. And maybe people are thinking about heading back out to the mountains. Wes, you had a chance to talk to some folks out there about how they're recovering the spring and how they hope to bring in visitors and handle visitors.
Yeah, you know, for a while there, after Helene hit in the western part of the state, they didn't want people. They needed to take care of themselves and clean things up and get back on their feet. But Western North Carolina also needs people when it's time, and it is now time for all of us to get back up there, and whether it's skiing in the winter or fall color in the fall, but the spring and summer, very popular time. So we called up our friend Candice Cook, who is the executive marketing director for North Carolina High Country Host, and she talked to us about what's been going on. She actually talked to us from the Welcome Center there in Blowing Rock. She also works there part of the time, so she locked the doors real quick for us and talked to us, and the first thing I asked her, Rachel, was, how is the recovery going?
All right, so here's that interview.
Things are moving right along. We're excited to say that all of the highways open to the high country are open and moving, and all of our attractions are now reopened. So the last one to reopen was Linville Caverns, and they opened back up in March. So you can come up and visit all your favorite attractions again. And yeah, so things are looking good up here in the high country.
Is there anything different other than what's happening with individuals? Anything different that we would notice coming up to visit right now?
I think the main thing you'll notice that on certain roads, you'll see downed trees on the mountainsides. But the ones, that were near the road have been removed. But, and that's not in all places. It might be, you just turn around the corner of a mountain and you'll see some trees down on the mountainside. It just, it depended on the way the winds blew during the storm. So
Yeah.
that's the main damage we're still seeing out there.
Well, we care about the landscape, obviously, and the nature part, but we also care about the people, and we want to get up there and support you guys. And I think everyone knows Western North Carolina in the fall for the beautiful color, and we know Western North Carolina when it's time to ski in the winter. But I don't know if we all know about Western North Carolina in the spring. So, what's exciting? What can we come see in the spring that we wouldn't normally get to see the rest of the year?
So, yeah, working here for the past 13 years, there are a few consistent questions that we get asked in the spring. First would be fishing. People know that, trout season and restocking starts at the beginning of April, and
Mm.
it's prime fishing season right now. So, yes, fishing is good right now. The waterways have been restocked, the water's clear, great fishing weather. And the other thing that we get asked is what flowers are blooming? That is a consistent question. There's certain flowers that people have that they're favorites. Right now, the pink shell azalea are blooming. That's a favorite for a lot of people. The flame azalea will be coming out later in the month. And then, of course, the iconic rhododendron. Those will be starting in June. And so usually that's when people want to come up and see those blooms. And that's the big push for spring here.
Yeah, it's funny how it works. We all come up there when it's the end of the season and things are dying off, and it's amazing fall color, and it's just as good when everything's blooming in the spring, which is happening right now. Do you have any favorite spots that we won't tell anyone else? Any secret spots?
Oh, come on. I think, well, my favorite place to see the flower blooms would be Trout Lake. It's on the Blue Ridge Parkway. It's part of the
Mhm.
Moses Cone Park. And they just have an amazing wall of rhododendron that bloom right there. So it's kind of like a little hidden treasure that I will share with you all if you make it up to Blowing Rock to check that one out.
Okay. Now, as you were saying, you've lived there your whole life. You're a big hiker. What's your favorite thing to do outside of that, or maybe give us one of your favorite hikes to do up in Western North Carolina?
Well, I would say one of my favorite hikes would be the Summit Trail at Elk Knob State Park.
Hmm.
That is one of the newest state parks, and so a lot of people haven't been there yet. But that hike will take you to a viewpoint where you can see more mountain ranges than you can from any other trail in North Carolina. It's a beautiful place to go and check out, and it's rarely busy.
Okay. All right. We'll add
Yeah.
that to our list. What other big events? I know down here in Central North Carolina, we have 14 festivals every weekend this time of year. Any big events or things we need to get up and see before the summer season hits?
Yeah, well, we're just coming off Merle Fest, which is a huge festival for us. But coming up, we have Art in the Park starting in Blowing Rock. Boonerang, the big music festival in downtown Boone, will be happening the third weekend of June. We'll have Jazz Fest also in June. And not to be forgotten, the Grandfather Mountain Highland Games, of course, will be
Yes.
happening the second week of July, as always. So those are the big ones before the fall season.
Okay. Now, let me kind of switch subjects here because down here in Central North Carolina, and this is always something that's very fascinating to me, your wildlife. We've had a lot of stories in eastern part of the state about alligators, and I know you don't have alligators up there in the mountains yet, but talk about the wildlife. I know you've got some good stories about some friends you've made over the years.
Yeah, so yeah, up here the big thing is bears. So people either
Hmm.
want to see them or they want to know how to get them not to see them when they're on
Right.
the trails. And I actually have one that's lived at my house for a few years. I've named him Hefty because his favorite thing to do is to get in my trash can, which now have bolted to the retaining
Smart.
wall,
Right.
and also have, ratchet straps on the top of that he can still make it through. They are very clever animals, that's for sure. So that would probably be my
Right.
biggest animal
You
story.
said you didn't say he lives in your house. He lives behind your house, right?
He lives behind my house.
Okay.
There's like some rocks up behind my house, like a little cave that he lives in back there. And he has a worn trail. I can see his route. He comes down,
Right.
goes to the creek, and then comes up and sees if there's anything new in my trash can, and then he goes down the road to the other neighbors' houses. So we know his normal daily route, looking for some snacks. And yeah, we all call him Hefty.
Okay. Well, great information. And listen, I know we're so excited that Western North Carolina is coming back, and Western North Carolina is in full bloom. So all my friends around here in Central North Carolina will make sure to get them up to Western North Carolina. Candice, thanks so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me, and we look forward to seeing you all.
So listen, Candice has lived in Western North Carolina most of her life. She went to App State, so she, more than anyone, knows the good spots to go check out. And, you know, Western North Carolina, when we start to get hot and humid, it's always a little cooler up there. So go check them out if you're looking for a quick weekend getaway. Always a good time. Get a whole list of everything going on up there and find out any of the stuff she was talking about. Their website is visitnchighcountry.com.
And it really is just a beautiful part of not just the state, but the country, no matter what time you're visiting. So yeah, let's cool off a little bit and go to the mountains. But another springtime or even summertime pastime, I guess, so to speak, baseball. We have a lot of great minor league baseball teams around here, including our friends out in Zebulon at Five County Stadium, the Mudcats. Our own meteorologist Dave Downey spoke to them a little bit later. We're going to show you that interview coming up after we take a quick break. Stay with us.
On the radar with the CBS 17 Storm Team.
And we're back here on the radar. Wes Hohenstein along with Rachel Duensing. We have plowed through some hurricane information. Let's leave that behind for now. Unfortunately, we'll probably have a lot more hurricane talks in the future, later this summer. But let's move on to some different subjects.
Yeah, I feel like people around here, they love sports of all kind, but I feel like there's something special about baseball around here, whether it's college, high school, or any of the great minor league teams around here. And obviously, weather plays a big role in that, not just getting the games in, but also how it affects how the people who work on the fields, the groundskeepers and all of that. And our own meteorologist, Dave Downey, went out and spoke to the wonderful folks, the groundskeeper at Five County Stadium in Zebulon. And here's what he had to say about how the weather impacts that, and of course, quite a bit more.
Talk to me about your story. You know, I understand you were with the 82nd Paratroopers.
I was in the Army. I'll fully admit, not a very good paratrooper, but I learned a lot of the lessons that have made me a pretty good groundskeeper. You know, the discipline, attention to detail, which is something they really stress in the military. That's my job out here. You know, I tell my guys when they start with me that, you know, the learning curve out here is really steep. It's like that, but it's really short. Nothing I do out here is that hard. I just take it to that next level of attention to detail. You know, mowing every day, keeping the dirt moist throughout the entire summer, not letting it dry out. It's those little things that end up giving you the good feel towards, you know, during the season.
What's the most difficult part, or what is really driving the attention to detail aspect?
You know, moisture control is probably the most difficult thing we deal with out here. You know, it's hot, it's dry, it's humid, it's windy. You know, Mother Nature doesn't cooperate. Mother Nature gives you what she feels like giving you for that day, and it's my job to read it and adapt to it and adjust for the guys. They want consistency at the end of the day. You know, that my job is to give them a field that is identical from one day to the next, so that they gain that consistency, and then the next level up should be exactly the same as this field. You know, that was the whole thing with the new PDL for the teams, was to get it so that every one of these fields throughout minor league baseball gives you the exact same playing surface no matter where you go.
Yeah, probably the funnest question here, inclement weather, at least funnest question for me to have to contend with. It's not fun at all. How do you deal with it, especially in July when there's pop-up storms in the forecast, you know, 8 out of 10 days in a 10-day?
You know, a lot of that just comes to having a good base field. You know, we know we're going to get weather. I look at the weather 4 or 5 times a day, every day, you know, especially during the season, to see what's going on, see if there's changes, and, you know, we adjust to it. Inclement weather is a part of what we do out here. There's no easy fix to it. You know, we just have to deal
With whatever that's going to bring us.
Yep. Right now it's pretty, but everybody here in North Carolina knows that, give it 30 minutes, it can change, especially this time of year. It really, it's North Carolina in the spring's one of the prettiest places to be, but it can be volatile. We're going to see that later on this week.
Yeah, spoken like a true meteorologist, John. Maybe in the previous or the next slide.
I think many groundskeeper and general manager in minor league baseball consider themselves having minors in meteorology. As much as we pay attention to the weather and start watching trends, and when you guys tell us different things, we actually know what those mean and know what that's going to mean leading up for later in the week. It's a big part of what we do.
It is. Last question, John. Favorite part of the job?
Oh, goodness. That's a really hard question. I've been doing this for a long time. I love what I do. I love all the aspects of it. I love the attention to detail. I was a endurance athlete as a young man, so working 16-hour days here and, having 30,000 steps in a typical day feed into being an endurance athlete. But I love what I do. It's a fun way to spend the day, and it beats having a real job.
And it's very clear that you love what you do, because this field for April 30th, the eve of May, is in pretty good shape.
I appreciate it.
What's the joke? If you love what you do, you never work a day in your life.
Right.
He clearly loves his job,
and the grass was green.
Better than my grass, let's be honest. But it's so interesting how he got there, being a paratrooper and his, as he said, not a great paratrooper, but being in the military and having that attention to detail to being a groundskeeper for a minor league baseball team. It's really interesting. It's very interesting how people get their jobs and find their passions in life, but clearly he's doing a great job, like we mentioned.
And very strong beard game. You think? You think the boss would let me do that?
Probably not.
Okay.
Although, if you get it long enough to where you can braid it like that, you might be able to get away with it.
Yeah, well, that would take a long time. I barely can grow this.
Right.
Anyway, all right. So it's not an episode of On the Radar unless we nerd out with some space news. And today we're going to go back 60 years. This just happened to pop up. I kind of browse NASA's website several times a week, and it was on June 3rd in 1965, 60 years ago, that the first American man walked in space. His name is Ed White. I think we've got some pictures. I mean, first of all, for a 60-year-old picture, that looks pretty good. So Ed White, the first American astronaut to walk in space, he was out there for 21 minutes. And he was only being held on by two cords, a 25-foot umbilical line and a 23-foot tether line. So there you can see him right there. That was all that was keeping him attached to the craft and floating out into space. But beautiful shots of the Earth behind it. Sadly, Ed White, you may recognize the name. 2 years later, he was a diehard astronaut, and he loved NASA. He was one of the fatalities when Apollo 1, the Saturn 204 fire, killed the astronauts on the pad in 1967. But definitely serving our country up in space, and that anniversary was 60 years ago today.
And solidifying himself as forever a part of history. I mean, it's crazy to think about 60 years ago, we had stuff like that, like you just saw there, where he was taking the first spacewalk. That's not something we would have fathomed probably 60 years ago, and this was, the first time that it had ever happened, at least with an American astronaut. I can only imagine what it was like on that capsule, as well as being part of this and being the pioneers to take Americans into space. It's absolutely amazing. Again, such a tragedy that he was one of the three astronauts that passed away in the Apollo 1 incident. But we have those images, we have this video, which again, this video from the 60s, I mean, it's fascinating. So we thank them for obviously the hard work that they did to take us into space and explore, the final frontier. Just a really great moment in history. And the fact that all this, they went back and colorized a lot of this too, also incredibly impressive. Although I think some of it was probably shot in color, but either way, very fascinating. And we always like to, nerd out a little bit about what's going on in space, or at least what happened in space as well. And I think I even read somewhere that, oh my gosh, can you imagine being the guy just floating around like that?
No.
And just like, well, I hope this umbilical line just holds on.
I'm sweaty just watching this from 60 years ago.
Space freaks me out. Kudos to everyone who wants to go and experience that. I am not one of them. But I even think I read somewhere that as they were coming back in, they couldn't get the door pressurized. And in order for them to head back, it has to be pressurized. So they were struggling with that. So imagine being the literal guinea pigs for being the first time in space, and you're up there. You just did this amazing feat of history, and you can't get the door closed.
Right, I know. Little things.
Yeah,
I mean,
it's crazy.
He's the reason why we can live in space right now, and he's part of the reason why we're going to Mars in the next few years. So it takes some pretty brave men and women to do stuff for the first time, and I'm not one of them.
Me neither.
Very happy here on
I'm
going
to keep my feet on the ground, yeah.
All right, let's finish up today's episode like we always do with some super sunsets that our viewers have sent. Let's start with not a super sunset, but a super sunrise. This is Scott Ellis. Scott's one of our best viewer photographers. This is out in Jordan Lake. So sunrise, meaning he got up really early for that beautiful shot. Next, let's go down to Florida, back to a sunset. Jan, this is Sun City Center, Florida. That's a mouthful. She used to live down there and is now back in North Carolina, and goes and visits, and sent me that picture. So thanks to Jan.
I love the reflection on the water there. I mean, it's gorgeous.
Twice as nice. You always get the reflection on the water. Let's go to Western North Carolina. This is the Linville Gorge. Leslie took this picture, and that is some Carolina rhododendron. Beautiful shot there.
Gorgeous.
Super sunset. Let's come to our own backyard. This is Holly Springs. Lisa. This is out at Sugg Farm. Beautiful shot there of the sun setting down on the hill. And we will finish up with this one. We're going to go West Coast. That is the Golden Gate Bridge. Marge was out there handling some family business. She used to live out there for years and now is here in North Carolina. And she was in Berkeley taking this picture across the bay in the Golden Gate Bridge. And if you keep going on there, that's Pacific Ocean and Japan. So that is open water there, but a beautiful sunset. And I show these every night at 11 o'clock, Monday through Friday on CBS 17. There's our email address. If you've got one in your camera roll or vacation coming up, grab me a super sunset or super sunrise and drop me an email too. Send it at cbs17.com.
That is it for this episode of On the Radar. As always, send us a beautiful sunset photo or even an idea of something to talk about on the radar. Maybe put it on your radar, and hopefully something has come to your mind now. And of course, we thank you very much for watching. For Wes Hohenstein, I'm Rachel Duensing. Have a fantastic day.